Hey everyone, it's Friday, September 12th, 2025. It is about 4:37 p.m. I've attempted many times to do this audio vlog today, and basically I just couldn't get, it right and all that, But what I was trying to do earlier when I initially did it was I was trying to record it while I was walking down Baldwin Avenue to Sperry Avenue. I think that's what it's called, Baldwin Avenue, Baldwin Street, what have you, however you look at it. I was walking down that to Sperry Avenue early this morning, a little around 8 o'clock or a little after 8 a.m. And if you're wondering why I was recording at that time and doing that walk, well, first of all, I was heading to the bus stop, which is across the street from the Walmart I used to work at. The other reason is because for the second Friday in a row, my job offered VTO, voluntary time off. Now, yeah, I could have denied it and stayed on, but the way things were looking, well, I'll be honest with you, it definitely felt like a lot of people would rather be elsewhere than inside a warehouse, that could get hot, can get a little humid, but could also feel like a ghost town at times, with not much to do. And honestly, I saw this coming. I saw this coming almost a mile away. The reason I say that is because last week, when I did my on-screen video talking about, why I was home early, like literally after 7 in the morning is when I recorded that video in my backyard. But basically, I said on there that the reason I was home was, just like today, last Friday I was given VTO. But last Friday I was given VTO the moment I walked in. You see, basically I clocked in last Friday, and only a few minutes after I was clocking back out. Mainly because the seasonal supervisor took me outside of the supervisor's office, because that's where you go when you show up a little later than normally scheduled, or and that's due to circumstances beyond your control sometimes. And normally you go to the supervisor's office to see where they need you, right? Well, I went there, and the seasonal supervisor, who wasn't there today, but like I said was there last Friday, basically looked over at his superiors, basically his fellow supervisors, some that are above him in status, and basically they all kind of gave the okay to, offer VTO. And I was among, I believe, the first that morning to be given VTO. Now, I don't know if they mentioned it in an overall employee meeting, before work employee meeting, but basically that's what I was given. And obviously, if they didn't mention it then, they mentioned it and offered it throughout the day. And several people that I work with, if not get rides with, if you will, to the bus stop, probably took up the offer that when it was given. But why would my job, even if it's seasonal, or any job for that matter, that's warehouse, distributing centers, retailers, you name it, why would they offer VTO, voluntary time off, 2 Fridays in a row? Well, it's real simple. Lack of productivity. Yeah, I looked this up on Google, and it's basically due to lack of productivity. Mostly due to certain things being out of the control of those that, run them, if you will. Or basically you get ahead of what your desired plan or your desired goal was, and basically after you get ahead, you pretty much lack in what you need to do. In other words, you don't have much to do afterwards once you get ahead. You see, last week, and I mentioned this on the on-camera video last Friday morning, I should say, basically after Labor Day, which was a week ago this past Monday, they had scheduled everybody Tuesday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Now you might ask yourself, well, why do that? Why schedule people an hour earlier than they're normally scheduled to come in? It's real simple. You see, it being Labor Day, a lot of distributing centers, retailers, warehouses, you name it, always feel like Labor Day and Labor Day weekend will cause them to fall behind. So by falling behind, they need to add an extra hour or so onto everybody's schedule to try to catch up. And that's what they did with the first shift in the morning and the second shift in the afternoon. Basically, they added an additional hour to the schedule to get things caught up, so that this week we could get back to a 40-hour week, or at least seemingly back to a 40-hour week. Now, here's the thing, and I mentioned this in the on-screen video. What they did last week came back to bite them. It came back to bite them because basically, again, it makes sense to want to try to catch up and all that, but literally you have more employees, not just permanently on a full-time and part-time and flexible basis, but you now have a lot of seasonal workers to help you out. So basically a lot of them altogether, I guess, got underestimated, and basically the management, because they underestimated them, saw that they were willing to catch up, and make sure everything was on point, and up to speed, and on schedule, so that way they don't have to do another 5 a.m. this week, which they didn't. And what does that lead to today? Well, today it led to VTO. But what's interesting about the VTO, and I mentioned this with the seasonal supervisor last week, when they were doing the whole 5 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Schedule, I told him, I joked around with him, and I basically said, before I clocked out, I said, you know what? I had a feeling something was up. I had a feeling we were heading in this direction. And he was, he joked around as well, saying, yeah, you kind of got that gut feeling, right? Like something was coming and all that. And I said, yeah, something was coming. I just had this feeling. And again, he laughed about it, joked around with me on it, that, he, in a way that basically made it sound like he agreed that, yeah, obviously this was something that, we should have saw coming because of the way things were going. If you know what I mean, because of the way things were going. But why would I, last Friday, be given that VTO as soon as I walk in? Well, quite simple. My situation is very unique as far as transportation goes, and because of its uniqueness, and I'm not the only one over at this place or any place that has this kind of situation, but because of the uniqueness and nature of the situation, I basically couldn't do the 5 a.m. I could only do 6. So what I had to do was use unplanned absences, UA, if you will, to let them know that, hey, I'm going to be there, but I'm going to be off by an hour. And that's what I meant, and that's what I meant when I said that as soon as I got there, I went to the supervisor's office, to see, where they needed me, and then that's when they told me, hey, we're going to give you VTO. And the way the seasonal guy, who wasn't there today, but was, there last Friday, I mean, he was there throughout the whole week this week, except for today. But basically last Friday, he made it sound like he was encouraging it. Now outright saying, now outright saying to me, hey, go and take your VTO. I encourage you to do it. Go take VTO. He didn't outright say it like that. But the way he was talking to me about it, gave me the sense that he was encouraging me, and maybe anybody else that they offered it to later on, to take the time off and enjoy the weekend for 3 days. And well, that's what I did. That's what I did. Even though it was a humdinger, having to turn around and come back, and just thinking to yourself, man, had I known in advance this was going to happen, I could have just slept in, But anyway, long story short, like I said, for the second Friday in a row, it happened again. But thankfully, I was able to get some work in this time around, at least 2 hours, before I basically VTO'd myself out for the day. But here's the thing about that too. Just like last week, when I looked at the 5 a.m. to 2:30 thing, and I'm thinking this is going to lead to VTO, I just got this feeling, or it may lead to it. I got this feeling. Just like I had that thought then of, yeah, this may lead to VTO at the end of the week or during the week somehow, because of the way they set things up. Just like I had that feeling there, I had that feeling again. But it was completely different. You see, the feeling I had this week was not only the fact that we were going to get VTO, but it was also the feeling because of certain situations that were kind of beyond the control sometimes of those in charge, or those placed, in responsibility of the area that basically kind of runs the place, is the central point of the warehouse, that being the tower. And there were several times throughout the past few days this week, that tower, between the late morning to early to mid-afternoon, mainly late morning, like 11 o'clock, I'll put it this way, it was like, during the past few days, it was like between 11 a.m. to almost, I would say, almost an hour before clocking out, which would be like 1 o'clock, 1:30, the tower would act up on several occasions. Yeah, they would act up on several occasions to the point that, yes, the silver lining in it is it allowed shippers like me to catch up on the work and kind of almost, if not entirely, clear out the conveyor line, of the boxes on there, have them build up in walls and everything in the trailer for the stores they were going to. Yeah, that is the silver lining, but the con of it is by doing so, it basically caused productivity to slow down. And what I mean by slow down, and hold on for a sec, drinking some ice cold Red Bull sugar-free edition. But anyway, not only did, like I said, the silver lining be, hey, we could catch up, clear out the conveyor belt, the conveyor belt as best we can before the tower turns back on and all that to get things running again. But the con is it caused a lot of a lack of productivity. And what I mean by that is that any department connected to the tower that connects to each other was affected by what happened. And like I said, to me, in my opinion, from what I saw, it happened between late morning, 11 a.m., between that time and an hour before we clocked out, or at least an hour and a half before we clocked out. That is when it happened. And what's interesting is on Thursday, I think it was Thursday or Friday, one of the two, no, it's the Friday, but today's Friday. What am I talking about? I'm getting my days confused here, But I think it was either Thursday or Wednesday. I'm not really sure. I think it was Wednesday. Not really sure. Got to go back and look. But I'll tell you this. When you're walking to break or walking to lunch, you're walking by the catwalk. And the catwalk is an area to where whoever goes up there, they basically got to be the one that's responsible to unjam some boxes from the conveyor belts so that the boxes come sliding down to the shipper so that the shipper can put them in the truck. And thus also prevent any red lights from blinking or going solid. Well, on Wednesday, I believe, I don't think it was yesterday, but Wednesday, I walked by there a couple of times going to break and lunch, and it was during I think it was maybe during the last break, I look up, I look to the left, because I'm walking, opposite, because when you walk inside, the side I was on Wednesday and Thursday, that's on the left side walking in, the right side walking out. Well, I was walking and I looked to the left side walking out, if you will, which is the right side walking in. But I look up and I look at the catwalk and I see nothing but boxes on the catwalk. And that to me is a sign of something's up. Something is not right. Something is screwing up with the tower. And what was happening is not only were we getting a lot of boxes to put in the trucks, which is a good thing, keeps us busy, but what was happening, it was also being mixed up with tinier boxes. Tinier boxes that were like colognes, perfumes, you name it. One cologne, which is, had a seal that said SAF on it. And I looked at that, and I just out of curiosity, I was wondering, because I was smelling something in one of the trailers, or in several of the trailers. I'm thinking, what does that smell, right? So I pick up one of the boxes, and the smell is coming from that. And I could tell right away it's a men's cologne because it said in a blue tape on the side, gift for him. So I smelled that and I was like, whew, oh, that's strong, that's powerful stuff. But it was those little boxes along with a few other boxes that came from PTL and other areas that got put on the conveyor belt to come into our direction that was basically screwing things up. They were causing things to come to a halt because what would happen is they would get stuck on the conveyors, on the tread wheels, on the tread wheels, if you will, the conveyor wheels. They get stuck on there because they're so tiny. They would get stuck and prevent things from going forward. So what happened, from what I can tell, is it caused things to jam up. And it wasn't just the main tower conveyor belts where the boxes are going back and forth and all that, while you're working on your section. Like you could look up and you can see the boxes going back and forth, or you could walk out of the trailer and you could see the boxes going back and forth on the main tower conveyor. But here's the thing. The little boxes didn't just affect that area or parts of that area. It also affected the conveyor belts where the boxes would come down from the main one to the trailer for the store they were going to. And there were times that me and others had to get the jam pulls, which are like little hooks, little pipes, or not little, well, the little and the huge, I'll put it that way, little and gigantic like pipes that are bent over into like a hook shape. So we had to get those hook pulls or jam pulls, put them up, and try to basically loosen, the little boxes to get them to come down. Because they were causing a huge traffic jam, if you will, on our conveyor belts that led to our trucks, but also on the main one as well. And the supervisors had to take care of that, as well as the people that were in charge of the tower for that day. But mainly they had to call upon maintenance to look at it and check it out. It's like basically, instead of putting those little boxes on the conveyor belts and letting them ship out along with the other big boxes, if you will, or medium or regular sized boxes and totes. Instead, what they should do is they should take those little boxes, get those totes that have the company name on them, put them in those totes, zip them up with a zip, put the lid on them, put a zip tie on them, then ship them out. That way it makes it easier and more efficient, in my opinion. It makes it easier and more efficient, in my opinion, to do that. For me and for anybody else that's, doing shipping for that day, putting the boxes in trucks. So to me it would be a lot easier if they would do that. Because, one, it would cause less of a jam, and basically these little things wouldn't get stuck at the top of the conveyor belts coming down to the trucks, or they wouldn't get stuck on the main one causing jams. But yeah, again, like I mentioned earlier, I had this feeling we were going to get VTO this week, just, not just based on the fact that, the tower was, kind of getting jammed up and everything, but you could just feel it. You could just feel like something was a little amiss, something was off. That even though myself and others, and look, I'm not the best shipper, but I am learning. I'm learning all the basics. I'm learning that when you start a truck, you're going to get a whole section of trucks sometimes. Like, to me, like on average, you get like 10 to 12 trucks at most. Sometimes it's like a 3-on-3 or 5-on-5 or whatever they call it, for trucks. So basically, I could have, and this was crazy. Well, not crazy, but this was kind of unique and kind of ironic and kind of funny. I ended up having the same trucks, trailer 112 to 134, 2 days in a row, that being Wednesday and Thursday. And 134 and 132 are not always primarily used to ship out to stores. I mean, they are, but for the specialty items to go to individual stores or one area in particular. So, to get to the point though, I'm not, the best, but I am learning. I mean, I've done it previously in previous seasons, but not on a full-time basis like what I'm doing now. And honestly, when I was, starting to get more of the hang of it now, like I was taking every instruction they were giving me, every bit of advice they were giving me, and I was applying it to what I had to do. Like, for example, when I would walk into a trailer to start the day, one of the first trailers, like trailer 112, I would look up and I would see, man, this guy didn't complete the wall. Or I would look down and notice, that before they left, they were starting a wall, but they didn't put the totes all the way to the other wall. Because you see, the company branded totes, the ones that have the have the top on them and the zip tie, keeping it together, if you will. They're supposed to be pushed to the other wall after it's completed so that you can have a foundation, a flush foundation for the new wall. And then you just go from there. You don't think too much about it. You just grab, look, and go. And that's it. Like, you grab the box after you kind of get your foundation going, and then you look and say, okay, where can I put this? And you're like, okay, turn it to the side, put it down. But here's the catch. Some of the boxes that are not company branded totes can't be pushed all the way to the back. No. If they end up on the floor as part of the foundation, you can only put them to a certain way. And like I said, though, basically I'm learning all that, and I'm looking at the trailers sometimes, and either I'm looking at the fact that, okay, I got to complete this roof, right, or complete this wall. Because the top's not always done. And sometimes I look at these walls and I'm like, yeah, you could have done better. You did all right. And I'm like, look, I'm not good either. I'm not the best either, but I'm trying my best. But I'm looking at these walls and I'm like, yeah, that's going to be an issue. It's going to be an issue. So anyway, long story short, guys, I basically am getting the hang of it and everything. And like I said, the way they taught me is that when you start the foundation, you got to use the company branded totes to push to the to the wall itself, to the wall that just got built and finished, or you just help complete or just finished off because the previous night didn't do it completely. All you have to do is push them to the back and then line up anything else that might be part of the foundation, but do it in a way to where they're flushed, if you will, evenly flushed with the totes. In other words, if it's a flat box, you can't just turn it vertically and put it to the wall because it's going to stick out. What you want to do is even it out, so that way if you have a little bit of space, and let's say you get one of those boxes like I mentioned earlier, you can place it down in the back, either vertically or horizontally, if you will. So yeah, that's basically what I was doing for most of the week, and I was getting used to it. I was getting used to it, taking the advice they were giving me, and basically, going and doing my job. Basically, set up my foundation, make it flush, or make it even if it's all totes, and just grab the next box and go from there. And basically, that's when you could start building the foundation, building your wall. But what's tricky sometimes is you always get these bigger boxes that come down. And these are the kind of boxes you would think that, man, I want to, you're thinking, because, hold on, I'm getting a little tongue-tied here. Sorry, I got a little tongue-tied. But again, one exception that sometimes makes it tricky, as I was trying to say, is you get these bigger boxes, and I mean huge. And they're mostly like pillows or maybe mattresses. Well, I wouldn't say mattresses, but they're kind of like those in-between things that you put between the mattress and the blanket, if you will, to kind of cool things off or make it, less rigid or less uncomfortable. So anyway, the big trick here is when these come around, after you've built your foundation, you got to figure out, okay, where do I put these? Especially, let's say, if you got the wall almost halfway up, you're like, okay, where can I put this? It gets hard. It gets hard to figure it out. But once you do kind of be like, where do I put this? And you don't think about it for too long, you just find an opening, or what you do is you kind of rearrange things, get an opening, like I do, rearrange some things, move things around, get an opening, put it in there, and then put the stuff back, where you think it would fit best, or something like that. That's kind of what I do. It's not easy, but it's kind of what I do. And the other thing is you got to use your step stool to go up to the, to go to the top, to put stuff on the top. And sometimes I would take those big boxes, and as carefully as I could, lift them, go up the step stool, and literally put them on the top if I see that there's room to do it. If there's not, then I'm just going to put them to the side and save them for the next wall. And sometimes that's where it comes tricky too, because you got to use them as the foundation, but you got to make them flush with a tote if a tote comes next, if that makes any sense. I know it sounds a little convoluted the way I was talking about it, but if that makes any sense, that's basically how it was shown, if you will. But yeah, like I said, I'm not the best one, but I am learning, and I'm going to get better over time the more I do it. I'm going to get better, I'm going to get quicker, I'm going to keep my eye out for the red lights, and so on and so forth. But I will say this. This was also a week of learning, or reteaching, if you will. Because on Monday, I'm not going to say too much, but for the second season in a row, I got taken in to the office, the supervisor office, to be retaught. That's right, to be retaught on how things are done. And thankfully, they didn't go too hard on me. There was only a notice, a conduct notice and everything I had to sign. But the truth is, at the end of the day, I'm glad they did it, because last year when it happened, it was the kick in the pants, the kick in the ass, excuse my language, God, that I needed to basically motivate me and get me better at my job. And when they did it last year, I got better. I called things out. I focused on what I needed to focus on and went from there. And after what they did here, even though it's still early, I feel like I needed that pep talk. I needed that rediscovery and everything. And now I understand what I need to do to make things right. I now understand. And hopefully things will turn out all right in the future, hopefully. But now I understand. But here's what's interesting though. Now, like I said earlier, last Friday I got VTO the moment I came in. I was offered it, and in the way, like I mentioned earlier, that the seasonal supervisor, who wasn't there today, but he was there throughout the whole week, and even last Friday, the way he made it sound last Friday, in his own way, even though he didn't directly say it, he was kind of encouraging that I take the VTO. Well, I took the VTO last week, and then, like I said, today I took it as well. I took the VTO today after 2 hours of work and everything. And like I said, like I mentioned earlier, the signs were there throughout the week as to, as to the facts. Excuse me, I'm trying to find the right word to say. Hold on for a sec. Let me get some Red Bull. Sugar-free Red Bull, pretty good. But like I said, the signs were just there throughout the whole week that you knew VTO was coming. You just weren't sure when and where. But obviously it was coming as soon as yesterday, because basically one of the new guys who took VTO today, I think it was yesterday, was offered VTO yesterday, and he said no, he wanted to stay on because it was Thursday, it wasn't Friday. So to me, it's like everybody looks at everybody, and it's not just this place that I work at, but it's any company that offers this kind of stuff when things are slow, lack of productivity, if you will. But basically, I think people look at the fact, that if VTO is offered on the weekdays, like mainly Monday through Thursday, they're not going to take it. But that if it's offered on a Friday, they'll take it. They'll take it. They'll be like, yes, we'll take it, because they want to start their 3-day weekend. They want to have extra time on the weekend. So they'll be like, yes, we'll take the VTO. And you know what? I can understand that. I can understand it justifiably, because, that is something that I would do. But if I know, hey, even if it's Friday and they do need a little bit of help, or it looks like things are slow right now, but yes, looks could be deceiving, it might be, to me at times on certain Fridays, a flip of the coin, if you know what I mean. But for me, primarily, if it's Monday through Thursday, I'm not going to do it because I need to work. But if it's Friday, that's a different story. And there are people that will take it on Friday, because if there's lack of productivity in their department, and one of the main areas they could get work in is making totes, what do you think they're going to choose over that? Exactly. They're going to choose, VTO. But as I was saying, VTO was offered last week, it was offered today, it was even offered various times throughout the week for certain departments. But what was interesting is yesterday, yesterday, basically about 20 minutes before we clocked out, every Thursday we have what is known as, how do I put this? We have the employee notes. We'll call it the employee notes. It has a different name, but I don't want to say what it is. But the employee notes. And this is something that basically we go and take part in every Thursday, which basically is 20 minutes, about a half hour to 20 minutes before we clock out. A half hour to 20 minutes before we clock out. And basically, we take part in this, get up to speed as to what the performance of the building is overall, among the region, that it's a part of as far as distributing center, warehouses go, what departments, sections in the distributing center, warehouse are, at, from a rank perspective as well as a percentage perspective and all that. And what's interesting is after that, basically, after, of course, we got all that given to us, the head mistress, if you will, honcho, if you will, comes up and talks about the schedule. Now, they do reaffirm everything that was said, about the performance and all that, as well as health rewards and stuff like that, here and there and whatever. They then talk about the schedule. And they say what's unique, they say that this upcoming week's schedule is unique. It's different. Because of the fact that things are not where they're at as of right now, and believe me, they will be at a huge level real soon. Trust me on that. She basically says that the new schedule for this upcoming week is going to be a little different, a little unique in its perspective. Because first of all, the regulars, that being the part-time and full-timers, and the flex people, the people that have the flex schedules and all that, they're going to be okay. They're going to be able to do Monday through Friday, except the flex schedule is going to have a little bit of a difference in hours. In other words, they're going to have a few hours cut off, if you know what I mean. But part-time and full-time will be okay, because they'll be able to do their 40 hours, if not their, the 32, 36 hours, if you will, if they're part-time. But as far as seasonal LTE goes, that's where it's going to get interesting. And that's kind of beneficial for me, because I was hoping for a big day to just relax and do stuff, on my own, outside of VTOing and everything. But, our headmistress, honcho, whatever you want to call her, the one that calls the shots, she comes out and says that the LTEs and the seasonals are going to be doing only 32 hours, which means we're going to be working Monday through Thursday. It might be less if they offer VTO. And that's the one thing I'm worried about. I'm thinking, well, you're telling us we're only going to work 4 days because, lack of productivity, things are not up to standard just yet, and believe me, they will be. What I'm looking at right now, folks, is what I consider the calm before the storm. This is the calm before the storm. And believe me when I say that when this calm is over, that storm's going to come rushing in, and it's going to be unlike anything you've ever expected. But anyway, because we're in the calm portion right now, a lot of people, seasonal and LTE, are going to be given an extra day off. Basically, we're going to have a 3-day weekend to ourselves. Basically have a 3-day weekend to do things we normally wouldn't be able to do because we're working on a Friday. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, basically she came out, mentioned what the schedule would be. And to me, I'm like, hey, this is an opportunity to do what I want to do. Going to have a decent check, hopefully, coming in and all that this week. Hopefully, you take care of a few things here and there, and I'll be able to basically do what I got to do. Just have a little fun, have a little time to myself, do my thing, so on and so forth. But here's what's interesting, though. And I was thinking about this. I'm guaranteeing you right now, there's a lot of folks that are seasonal and LTE. And I'm sure a lot of you listening know this from experience because you've been in that position no matter where you've worked. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are hearing this right now, like I did, or heard it yesterday, like I did, and they're thinking to themselves, "That's great news," but this is what they're probably thinking. This is what they're probably thinking. As I was saying, they're probably thinking, "Hey, this is great news. We get a 3-day weekend." But they're also putting an asterisk next to that thought, going like, "Yeah, this is great. We're gonna have a 3-day weekend, but we might want to kind of hold off on planning the 3 days, as of right now." Because here's why I say people are gonna look at it like I do, like with an asterisk. Because even though it sounds promising right now, I am not going to be surprised if sometime next week, all the seasonal people get pulled aside. All the seasonal LTE people and even some of the flex people, we get pulled aside and we're told, "Yeah, change of plans. We need you Friday at your regular hours because we're picking up steam and we're going to need all the help we can get." Or I wouldn't be surprised, again, if we all get gathered together and we're told, "Hey, we're going to need a little extra help, so we're opening up VTI," which is the opposite of VTO. And in this case, VTI is voluntary time in. So I almost have this feeling that that's what's going to be coming. I almost have this feeling that, my friends, is what's going to be coming our way next week. Now, could I be wrong? Absolutely. But right now, they're scheduling as if nothing significant is going to occur yet. Nothing's going to significantly occur yet. But again, it's all about keeping a watchful eye out and putting that asterisk right there next to any plans you have. Because you don't know whether or not those plans are going to be able to go through, or you're going to have to change the plans back to maybe a normal Saturday, Sunday ordeal, because you might be told, "Hey, you're back onto a regular schedule. We're going to have to add you to Friday," or you're going to be given the VTI opportunity. One of the two. But anyway, I just got that feeling. Something is telling me, keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out for that. And I think, honestly, the people in charge, our head mistress, boss, if you will, she's probably already thinking that herself, like, "Yeah, I'm going to have to keep an eye out on everything, because even though I've told them that, hey, you don't have to work next Friday, that might change." I guarantee you she's letting herself know that. She's letting HR know that. She's letting her supervisors know that. She's letting anybody that has a bit of pull in there, that's in that leadership section, if you will, that tree, because we have like a little tree with pictures of the supervisors and our boss on there to kind of show like who's on the higher rank and all that. I guarantee you she's already taken them aside, or she's been emailing them, telling them, "Yeah, the LTEs, the seasonals, and the flex, they might have Friday off or might have their hours reduced." That in the case of the flex workers, or the flex employees, excuse me, she'll probably type in, "Yeah, that's what's planned right now, but don't hold me to it. Don't hold me to it, because we might have to talk with them and say tell them either we're offering VTI for Friday, or we got them on the schedule for Friday." I won't be surprised. I won't be surprised come Monday, because Monday is when we usually just have the all-group employee morning meeting before going to our sections. I will not be surprised, whatsoever, if she comes out and says, "Yeah, change of plans seasonal, change of plans LTE. You guys are going to be here on Friday because we're picking up." I will not be surprised. I will not be freaking surprised. And I guarantee you, there's a lot of fellow seasonal workers and LTE workers that are thinking, like I said, they're thinking the same thing I am. "Yeah, it sounds good right now, but how do we know it's not going to change? How do we know it's not going to change? Because it just might. It just might." So I'm keeping an eye out for that. I'm keeping an eye out. I'm like, "Yeah, you're telling us that now, boss. But how do we know that's not going to change?" Because it will. Because it will. But anyway, with that said, though, with that said, basically as of right now, if things don't change, I will have next Friday, all to myself from beginning to end. From beginning to end. All to myself. To be able to do whatever I want to do, if you know what I mean. But, like I said, we'll just have to take it in stride and see what they have planned. That's all I'm going to say. But basically, this week has been really interesting and all that. With the exception of just doing 2 hours, it was my first full week doing the whole thing. And I have to say I did pretty good except for Monday's reteaching situation. But I have to say I did pretty good. And just look forward to next week and see what happens. And again, I just get this feeling things are going to change. Things will change, because either we're going to be told we're back on the schedule for Friday, which is a week from today, or we're going to be told, hey, we're offering VTI for Friday. I will not be surprised at either one. I won't be whatsoever. But anyway, though, guys, I just wanted to do this vlog to let you know what's going on. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if you guys have ever dealt with anything I've mentioned here in your own work experience. Like, have you dealt with these kind of situations, whether you've worked in distributing centers or warehouses, of any kind? Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and all that. Now, before I go, you're probably thinking, well, what were you doing today that made you get VTO? Because you say you're mostly shipping now, right? Well, I'm still categorized under stripping and associate. But yeah, I'm primarily shipping. But, the primary job above shipping, which is, I guess you could say it's an equal situation right now. The primary section is stripping. But here's what's interesting. I went into the stripping area today, and I saw what it looked like. I saw how many of us there was. I saw the trailer I was given, and I was like, are you serious? Because all it was one pallet already stacked up with boxes, and in the back was just a bunch of bagged up items that we put into what's known as gaylords, which is, essentially just empty boxes, like moving boxes and all that, or boxes that have stuff in them originally, and so on. And then I just took care of that. I took care of that within an hour. And that was it. It was like, is that it? Any more? And I walked around, I'm thinking, wait a minute, trailer 191 seems to have something there, but it doesn't. So it's like, yeah, you're putting me here for that? And then there's one girl that was there, and I think I've worked with her before in a previous season. She was given the opportunity to either finish her trailer or go make totes. And she's like, no, I'll finish my trailer. Because, again, as I said earlier, you're going to have an option. If things slow down in any department, that's either you make totes, or you can take VTO if that's offered. A lot of people are going to take VTO over totes, believe me. But anyway, though, yeah, basically, it was just like a ghost town, honestly. I mean, there was stuff to do, but it was a ghost town. And then afterwards, they just had me look at the red light, had me go back to shipping and, well, not beyond a section, but just look at the red lights and take them down. Basically, move the stuff down off the, on the conveyor so that the light goes off. And again, it all has to do sometimes with just some of those smaller boxes, getting stuck, on the conveyor belts or the conveyor wheels, and causing things to be stuck in that section to where it will cause a blinking red light or a solid red light. But anyway, that's basically what I did. Honestly, I believe if they would have just put me in shipping from the get-go today, I would have been there I would have at least been there till I would say 11 o'clock, because my lunch, right now for this month, because it changes and varies every other month, my schedule for this month is a 10:45 lunch, 30-minute lunch at 10:45. So I guarantee you I would have at least been there till at least 10:45 or 11:15. And then if offered VTO, I would have been gone and on the bus, the 1214 bus, to come back here and be here by 1 o'clock. had things worked out that way. And they might work out that way next week. We don't know. But anyway, though, guys, like I said, I just wanted to come on here and talk about this, give you my thoughts on the here in this vlog. Let me know what your thoughts are, though. Comment down below, like the video, ring the bell for notification. Subscribe to the channel, share the video. Also, click on the links in the description, guys, to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, as well as click on the last link in the description to go to my Teespring store for merchandise you can't get anywhere else. But guys, also let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section as well. Let me know if you guys have ever dealt with something like this in your jobs, throughout your experiences, whether it's been actual retail, in stores, warehouse, distributing centers. Let me know. I'd love to hear your experience and what your thoughts were when you ever had to go through something like this before as well. And that's all I can say, guys. So until next time, I am out. Take care. God bless.